Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Miri Eisen, sitting in for Jonathan Hesse, and today is the 696th day of our program of Israel at War, 696 days since Hamas on October 7th did their barbaric attack. There's been one change over the weekend. We've gone from 50 hostages held by Hamas to 48 hostages held by Hamas. 2 additional bodies came back to Israel, brought by Israeli troops, by Israeli servicemen back to Israel over the weekend. As we do this show today, we will have with us 3 experts to talk about the different subjects. With us today are Brigadier General in Reserves and the former head of the Mossad Intelligence Directorate Chief, Brigadier General Amnon Sofrin. Welcome, Amnon.
Hello, Miri.
With us also is former commander in the Israel Air Force and the chief of the IDF Cyber Staff, Brigadier General in Reserves, Yaron Rosen. Yaron, shalom.
Hello, Miri. Good to be with you.
And as always, we have at Israel at War with us Amir Oren, TV7's own editor-at-large. Amir, let's start off and say, the beginning of the week, what do we have right now that we're talking about when it comes to Israel at War?
So, Miri, it's not good enough to be with you by remote, but we'll have to make do. In Israel, September 1st is not Labor Day, but a lot of labor is still being put into what the Israeli Defense Forces has been doing in Gaza, preparing for the main thrust into Gaza City. But while they are doing that, there's fighting going on in other sectors of Gaza, and occasionally, unfortunately, there are casualties, killed or wounded, sometimes because of quote-unquote friendly fire. The 2 bodies which you mentioned were taken by the Israeli Defense Forces special units, as well as Shabak, the Internal Security Agency, which showed the way. They were brought in for forensic examinations, and when the experts deemed them safely recognized, they were brought to the attention of the families and made public. And as you said, this made for 20 hostages who are still alive in captivity, along with 28 additional bodies of hostages, some of whom were already murdered on October the 7th, 2 years ago, and whose bodies were abducted to Gaza, some of whom died or were murdered in captivity. Now, the Israeli Security Cabinet has been meeting in a long session the other night. It was in an undisclosed location and at an undisclosed time for fear of a Houthi reprisal following the Israeli strike Friday on a Houthi government session, where the prime minister of the Houthis, there are of course other Yemenites, but the Houthis control most of the southeastern part of the Arabian Peninsula, and the strategic seaport of Hodeidah. And the prime minister, several ministers, and other senior officials were killed in this strike. It is not yet known whether the intended targets, the Minister of Defense and the military chief of staff, were among those killed.
So as we look at it right now, and I'm thinking about this right now, talking both Amir, Yaron, and Amnon, first I'm going to ask this question of Amnon, and everybody should know Amnon is a former commander of mine, so I'm allowed to call him Amnon, even if he is a brigadier general and high-ranking. But Amnon, as we think about it right now, Amir started by talking about what was also an operation inside the Gaza Strip to bring back 2 bodies of hostages. There's still an additional 48, and on the other hand, in this same weekend, we have an Israeli precise attack that takes place thousands of kilometers away from Israel inside Yemen, and a specific attack. I was struck by the fact that this is actually a little different from what we had done until now. I hadn't noticed until now that when it came to the Houthis, if Israel attacking in that specific target of specific people, something that we've done extensively, both in the Gaza Strip and, as everybody knows, with Hezbollah in Syria and in Iran. Can you take us a bit through the difference in that sense of what it means that we, on the one hand, can bring back 2 more bodies, which is so important to bring back all the hostages, and on the other hand, do these kind of attacks, the kind of intelligence, the kind of effort that must go into it? What does this mean if we changed our capabilities when it comes to Yemen?
First of all, the answer is yes. As you know, Mary, we are very good at what we call very precise information, and giving a specific location and specific window or specific door to get in or to hit in. But we failed in what we call the big assessment or the large assessment that what we had to do on October 7, 2023. But nevertheless, if you look at what we call very accurate information and very precise, that can lead us to hit specifically persons or installations or anything else, we are very good at that. And since we understood that the Houthis are attacking Israel over and over again, over the last over the last 2 years, we began to develop our capabilities to be able to monitor what happens in Yemen, to build our infrastructure, to build our capacity, to be able to hit and to understand better what the Houthis are planning and to follow them. And this is the result of what happened during these 2 years. We didn't pay any attention to the Houthis before. We didn't deal with the Houthis before. We had what we call general knowledge. We didn't take into consideration that they are going to interfere. We didn't take into consideration that they are going to hit us over and over again, and to block what we call the freedom of navigation on the Red Sea to Eilat Port and the Suez Canal. And therefore, we had to build our capacity and to begin to follow what happens in Yemen. And I believe that what happened in this weekend, this precise attack that took almost all the leadership or the political leadership of the Houthis, is an excellent demonstration of building capacity within the war in what we call in accordance to the changing circumstances.
And I take what you said right now, Amnon, and I'm moving on right now in that sense, Yaron. I'm fascinated by the fact that over the weekend, again, we took out what has been very much a figure for Israeli. I'm not sure how much he's a figure elsewhere. Abu Ubaidah, he was sort of like the main spokesperson on behalf of Hamas, and in a funny, perhaps, way. Cynically, most Israelis know who he is. I'm not sure that the rest of the world know who he is. And as Amnon just mentioned right now, Israel made the decision to take out the political leadership of the Houthis. I want to remind us all, the Houthis are a terror organization defined as such by Israel and by many other countries in the world. Hamas is a terror organization. But how do you view the impact in that sense of taking out what is perceived as a political leadership, of taking out somebody like Abu Ubaidah, who most definitely was a spokesperson? He was not necessarily the fighter or he was part of the terror army, not necessarily the one who held arms. How do you see that in that sense? Is this a change in Israel's decision-making that we're taking out other types of leadership and not just the military ones? Do you think this has an impact that we're looking to try to achieve right now?
I think specifically when we're talking about Gaza, Israel is continuing to mow the grass, if you will. And I think we did this quite successfully. Not that I think that this will be how the war ends, because once you mow the grass, your problem is divided into many little problems. I think we spoke about this on other shows about how Gaza is turning into separate clans, because it was like that. It was pretty cohesive under Hamas and the Islamic Jihad pre-October 7th. Now, because Hamas is growing weaker by the day, Gaza is breaking up back down to the family orientation. So now we're having different problems. So we don't have anything else better to do, sadly, at this point, when the government is not turning the military victory into diplomatic success or some kind of arrangement that ends the war, a framework that ends the war in Gaza. So the military just has to continue to mow the grass. That's specifically in Gaza. In Yemen, I think it's a different story, not only because it's far, far away, it's because it's run more like a country. As you mentioned, the Houthis, and Emil mentioned, the Houthis are controlling a very large part of Yemen and some strategic ports, etc. And also they are well supported by Iran, and so their capacity to survive is much different than the Hamas because they're just far away. We can't invade Yemen. So projecting Israeli power far away is very different than the options we have here in Gaza. And just to end this point, in Yemen, it's really it will really be attrition war with the Yemenite Houthis, Ansar Allah, because we won't be able to completely stop them because of the distance and the problem of, applying force on the ground, but we will be able to attrit them quite well, as just seen in the last few days, and they will pay a high price because the more time passes, Israel has immense intelligence focus capabilities, and we will hit them quite hard, and it will just be, they will have to continue and weigh their options. The more they continue, the higher the price they pay, a classic coercion strategy from Israel's part.
So look at what you just said, Yaron, in that sense. It's that our success against something very far away, as opposed to the term that you used, mowing the grass, or the continuation of that policy inside the Gaza Strip. And you mentioned Iran in passing. And I want us for a moment to remember it's the beginning of a new week. And as we look at that, and Amir, here I'm in that sense looking towards you, over the weekend, and I'm sure this has already come up, the G3 have already said that they are going to, within a month, reenact what we call the snapback or the reassertion of sanctions on Iran. And Iran backs the Houthis, Ansar Allah. And Iran has been more than a voice. Iran has been supplying capabilities, including within the cyber world, in that sense of generating a very large voice worldwide for Hamas for different platforms. So here we are. It's September, as you said, September 1st, 2025, first day of school in Israel. And this month of September, to me, is going to be something a bit different, both because of the UN session and because of the snapback, because of Iran. And I kind of want for a moment for you to bring that together for me. What are these different things going to look like during September? What can we expect in the sense, do you think that the president of Iran is going to try and come and speak at the UN? The United States has already blocked the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas from coming to participate in that UN session. And I say all of this because we're attacking the Houthis. We're mowing the grass with Hamas. I'm using that term that you used, Yaron, before. We're looking around us, but in September, there's about to be a pretty big show in the United Nations, which is always very showy. And Iran at the end is a central part of that. How do you see this happening, playing out a bit more in the upcoming weeks?
So, Miri, as long as we are expanding the discourse at your suggestion, let us remind ourselves that today is the 86th anniversary of the start of World War II. On September 1st, the Germans invaded Poland. A week earlier, Stalin and Hitler had their Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. And tomorrow, September the 2nd, we are going to mark exactly 8 years since the end of the war, the Japanese surrender in Tokyo Bay. And the United States government has gone into the effort of republishing the surrender papers of the Japanese in order to signal that this is what they expect to happen in every conflict which President Trump does not manage to end. So if we look into this concept of surrender, do we expect a senior Iranian official, be it the supreme leader or his representative, the president or the foreign minister, to come to the United Nations and wave a white flag and say, okay, US, Israel, you won. We are not going to have any nuclear project, any enrichment of nuclear material. And by the same token, are the Hamas leaders, whoever is surviving, those who are killed, are they going to say it? No, we won't have such a formal ceremony, the instruments of surrender, and all of that. This belongs to another era. And this also goes to your question about Abu Ubaidah, because there's a battle of narratives. You, Miri, personally, you are an expert in this particular business of information operations and tugs of war over narratives. So Israel has seen fit to kill the spokesperson, the face, even though it was covered, the face of Hamas. It will not have a lot of impact on how this conflict ends, but we should all remember that any government, be it democratic or otherwise, has to go back to its public and announce something. Why did it prolong the war up to now if eventually it had to compromise? So such small achievements substantially probably contribute something symbolically to the government's case.
Absolutely. And as you're talking about that, Amir, right now, I'm going to quote for you all right now out of the G3 statement that they made over the weekend. One of the sentences that to me kind of stood out was, Iran's non-compliance is clear and deliberate. And I put that out there right now because here we are right now. How many years can we talk about Iran, the nuclear, the quest? And inside that statement that was made by the G3, not by the United States, by those who wanted to continue the dialogue with Iran, who right throughout their statement there, we were dialoguing, we were dialoguing, we were dialoguing. Not only that, they almost say, and we're going to continue to do so until the end of September if you don't comply. Amnon, do you think they're ever going to comply? Are they going to come back and renegotiate? Is Iran going to come back? And again, I completely want to highlight what Amir said. They're not going to surrender. Is there a way that Iran would find itself back, or are we to expect at the end of September full sanctions to be reenacted against Iran? Because that is significant. It has not been around for many years.
Let's look at what Iran is signaling right now. The Iranian regime is signaling that we are not going to give up. We are going to sanction you because of what you did, meaning the parliament has convened on this Friday, and they decided on three major steps. The first one is to retire from the NPT, from Non-Proliferation Treaty that Iran is signed on. Second, to stop the negotiations with the Europeans and with the United States government or administration. And the third one is to stop cooperating with the IAEA. These are the decisions. It was not approved formally yet, but this is to signal to the whole world we are not going to give up. And in return to what you did, we are going to escalate right now. And in parallel, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Arkachi, sent a letter to the United Nations, to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and appealing to him that please do not sanction us, don't go on with this mechanism, and we want to negotiate. And in parallel, he sent it to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the European Union, claiming that we want to go on negotiating, but please don't apply any pressure on us, and please don't apply any sanctions. That means that Iran is talking in two voices. The first one is to apply, we're willing to negotiate, we're going to go on and negotiate. But on the other hand, if you are not going to apply to our request, we're going to escalate the situation right now. That means that the Iranians are not going to give up. They insist on keeping on enriching uranium on the Iranian soil and not giving that up. But this is what we call a starting point. I believe that in the end, they will have to compromise in some way, not to give up totally, but to gain some small gains like they did always when signing some deals in the past. And let's see what happens next.
So here we have, in that sense, the Iranians in different voices. I wrote down to myself, double talk. How Iranian? You say one thing to the Europeans, something else. But there's also that aspect which connects also into what Amir was saying before about the whole narrative of the Iranians as the victim, as opposed to the Iranians as the ones who were trying to achieve nuclear weapons that even the EU had to call out. And I say all of that, Yaron, because the other aspect that I see us facing in September is Syria, September 2025. On the one hand, I sit here and go, wow, I really hope and expect to see, in its own curious way, the president or interim president or not elected president of Syria, Ahmed Shara Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who has announced that he is going to come to the United Nations to give a speech. And I go back to both what Amnon was saying about sanctions, about what that means. How do you view right now, Yaron, what's going to be playing out in that sense with Syria within all of these different things that go on? Because Iran is trying to get out of doing anything extreme with the nuclear. Hamas, and I agree with you, mowing the grass, and that's not where we want to be going. Houthis, we may be more efficient, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be stopping it completely. What are we looking at when we're talking about Syria, September 2025?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think if we look at the wider picture, we've shifted tectonic plates in the Middle East. Now it's time to sort of cement those changes. And with all the military success, the diplomatic legacy will be the one that will be remembered decades from now. Now, when we look to Syria, it's really important to understand that Syria can be either a bridge for Iran, that is what it was before, or it's a buffer zone for Israel. And what we have to make sure that Israel sort of cements, in that same sense, it cements the capacity to reflect its power in the southern part of Syria, both to be a buffer towards Israel, as it was for years, mainly with understandings with the Assad regime, and also today to protect the Druze in the south part in Sweden. So Israel needs to reflect its power. Now, I was talking about the Iranian bridge as a risk, but there's also another bridge which we have to really take into account. And I'm not sure which one is more dangerous, which is the Turks. Turkey is now a serious influencer inside Syria, and we have to make sure that Syria doesn't build a bridge for its power projection towards Israel, because the Muslim Brotherhood and everything we're seeing from Turkey, from Qatar, and from other regions, along with the Shiite extremism, is something we have to play very smartly with the diplomatic regional frameworks that we're building now as we speak.
And as you say that, Yaron, I think that all of us agree to a large degree that we have great military might, we have immense intelligence and operational capabilities, and yet we don't seem to be managing in any of these cases to really translate these into real diplomatic successes. I want to end, as much as possible, with Israel at war, looking in that sense. A little maybe sentence in that sense there. What do you think we could be doing that perhaps could be some kind of a diplomatic success?
Diplomatic success will be, first of all, to sign some agreement with Syria that will enable us to keep the border very clean, very calm, and very not threatening and not seeing what we call some terror organization along our borders. The second one is to make sure that in Lebanon, Hezbollah is dismantled. And I believe that this is going to a clash inside Lebanon, because just yesterday, Nabi Berri, the Shiite leader of the Shiites in Lebanon and the chairman of the parliament, openly stated that we are not going to give up our weapon systems and Hezbollah should not be dismantled. And this is, of course, contradictory to what the government decided. And it is leading to a clash that I think it's unavoidable. And I believe that everybody will try to make the best that it won't happen, but I'm not sure that it's going to help.
So here we are right now. Syria, Lebanon, Iran, the Houthis, Hamas, Gaza Strip, all of these different things. Amir, a few last words of wisdom before we finish off the show?
Well, maybe not of wisdom, but you mentioned Ashara going to the UN. This would be like Fidel Castro coming on the heels of his victory over Batista in Cuba some 65 years ago, not to mention Arafat in 1974. But, you and I are 60 kilometers apart, yes, yet we share the screen. So Abu Mazen, the Palestinian leader, may be barred from New York, but he'll appear on TV sets worldwide anyway.
That I'm sure that we will do. So I want to thank our three panelists, Amir, Amnon, Yaron. I want to thank you all at home, and thank you so much for joining us. Shalom from Jerusalem.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.